Tonight and tomorrow is obviously Lag BaOmer, which is a very big deal. And it will be a very different Lag BaOmer to usual, because Lag BaOmer is typically focused on Meron, and there's usually hundreds of thousands of people and a big celebration. And then other places, there are big bonfires and so on. I believe that the chief rabbinate of Israel issued a whole warning about how to be careful, not to set your house alight, basically, because people are going to make bonfires. In Israel, the bonfires is a very big part of Lag BaOmer, so they had to warn people to be very cautious, obviously, in their own homes. For us as Hasidim, Lag BaOmer has a whole different dimension to it as well. In addition to all the great celebration, and it is a day of incredible celebration, but the persona of Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai, the person, is a very interesting part of Lag BaOmer, because it is his Yortzeit. And the primary reason, people don't realize this, that the primary reason we celebrate on Lag BaOmer is because before he passed away, Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai instructed his students that every year on his Yortzeit they should make a massive celebration. So that's actually where it took off. So the personality of Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai is very, very interesting for a variety of reasons. Firstly, in and of himself, because as a person he's very interesting. Secondly, because Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai is a good example of what the role of a Rebbe is, because Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai was a Rebbe in his time. And thirdly, because it has relevance to us today, that the date of Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai's celebration, that's what it's called, the Hilula, the celebration of Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai, has direct relevance to us as individuals. So I don't know if we'll be able to unpack all of that in the amount of time that we have, but just some thoughts. The Rebbe often would quote a story that there was a student of the Arizal who himself was a very great Kabbalist. And this particular student felt the loss of the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash so acutely that every single day of his life, he would say the paragraph Nachem. Nachem is usually what we only say on Tisha B'Av. And Nachem is about asking Hashem to console us and to give us comfort for the loss of the Beis Hamikdash. So he felt the loss of the Beis Hamikdash so personally that he used to say Nachem every single day. And that obviously includes Shabbos, Yom Tov, Purim, Chanukah, everything. Anyhow, when it came to Lag BaOmer, and during the course of his davening, he said Nachem. So later he had a dream, and Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai came to him in the dream, and he threatened him terribly. I don't want to say all the things that he said would happen to him. He said, how dare you mix mourning into my day of celebration? Which is interesting. That implies that it was somehow more offensive to say Nachem, to speak about the destruction and mourn the temple on Lag BaOmer than it was on a Shabbos. And usually, obviously, Shabbos you're not allowed to mourn. So it's fascinating, what's the message? What was he trying to say? So to appreciate and to understand this concept, first of all, we have to understand this. We're told that there are certain tzaddikim, and Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai was probably chief among them, who were on such a great spiritual level that even though they physically lived at the time of the destruction, Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai, as we know, was a hunted fugitive. The Romans wanted to kill him. So even though they had that personal difficulty in their own life, and they had person who'd been through that experience of the destruction, nevertheless, Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai, and maybe some others like him, were at such a lofty level that nothing changed for them with the destruction of the physical Beis Hamikdash. That means that whatever spiritual things were available at the time of the Beis Hamikdash remained available to them even after its destruction. Now, think about this for a second. You and I, ordinary people, we don't know what that means. What on earth are you talking about? For us, in the time of the Beis Hamikdash, you could go to Jerusalem and you would see miracles happen in front of your eyes, and you would have this great spiritual awareness, and it touched you to the core of your being. It was a very meaningful experience. Without the Beis Hamikdash, it's quite obvious for us that experience is no longer available. So to us, there's a major difference between having the temple and not having the temple. If you want to tell me that there's somebody of that caliber, Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai is at such a high level that he doesn't experience the loss of the Beis Hamikdash, it's very nice, but it's very abstract. It doesn't talk to me. I don't relate to it. I don't understand what it means. I don't understand how it's supposed to apply. So it's weird that Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai should have the expectation of other people, including this student of the Arizal, that he should also not feel the loss of the Beis Hamikdash on the day that is Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai's celebration. That's like saying somebody who is lahavdil, a professor of astrophysics, getting annoyed at you that you don't know how to identify which particular galaxy you're looking at through a telescope. Like, I'm not schooled in that. I don't know it. It doesn't relate to me. How do you have that expectation? How can you get annoyed at me? It's not my thing. Also, just to further develop the personality of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, just to understand who the person is. So we're told that Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai had a colleague called Rabbi Meir. Now, they were both students of Rabbi Akiva. And Rabbi Akiva had a system in his yeshiva where as you progressed, as you became a greater scholar, so you sat closer to the front for obvious reasons. There were no microphones, there were no recording devices. So obviously you wanted the people who were the best students to be the closest to the rabbi so they could make sure to get all the information and to retain the information to be able to pass it on to the next generation. So at one particular point in time, Rabbi Akiva takes Rabbi Meir and he tells him to come sit right in the front, like the first seat next to him. So Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai was surprised. He was surprised. He was like, why it wasn't him? Not because of ego, just because he understood the system and you want to obviously have the greatest person right by the rabbi. And he knew himself and he knew Rabbi Meir. And he was surprised that Rabbi Akiva put Rabbi Meir first. He didn't say anything, but Rabbi Akiva detected that he was upset about it. So Rabbi Akiva said to him, listen, you have to understand, it's enough that I and Hashem, your creator, know your greatness. In other words, the implication was that even somebody of the caliber of Rabbi Meir, who was the greatest of the students, was not capable of understanding Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai's greatness. So what about you and me? You and me, how are we going to understand? How can you relate to such a person? If his own colleague, who was the most exceptional scholar, Rabbi Meir, could not appreciate his greatness, how could you and I relate to him? Now, this holiday of Lag BaOmer, if it's all about Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, and if it's all about what he represents, should, by rights, be a holiday that's not for the lay person. This should be a holiday for the mystics, people who are flying at that altitude. They should be able to understand and to celebrate. And yet what we find is Lag BaOmer is 100% across the board. So much so that it's probably fair to say that many non-observant Jews in Israel who may not celebrate Yom Tov or Shabbos celebrate Lag BaOmer and they feel an affinity. So it's very bizarre. Like, how could you have somebody who's at such a high level and yet the way that we commemorate him is so entry level and so inclusive? One more point just on that. We know that Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai and his son were fugitives from the Romans because he had spoken out against the government and they didn't like it. And he went and he hid in a cave, he and his son, and they remained in this cave for 12 years. And when they came out of the cave, they were so spiritual, you can imagine. They had spent 12 years without any distraction, completely focused only on esoteric concepts. That's all they did the whole day. That's when the Zohar was produced, was during that period. So when they came out of the cave, and they started to look around and they saw people who were doing their normal business, running around, stressing over finances, spending time trying to make money. They couldn't handle it. And they couldn't handle it to such an extent that actually wherever they looked, people started to get harmed from them looking at them because they were critical. I mean, here they'd been completely divorced from the physical realm, and they come outside and everybody's still in the rat race and trying to make a buck. They couldn't relate to it. So Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai says to his son, he says, this is no good. We've got to go back into the cave. They go back into the cave and they spend another year in the cave, in a sense, coming back down to earth. Then when they came out of the cave the next time, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai goes to the first community that he finds, and he says, what can I help you people with? And they told him that they had a particular issue. There was a field, and what had happened was somebody had plowed the field, but previously there'd been a body buried in that field, so now nobody knew where the grave was, and no Kohen could take a shortcut through the field. So there was an inconvenience for the Kohanim that they'd have to take a detour around the field, probably an extra 5 minutes of their time on a daily basis. And immediately Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai went to work to find an halachic formula to allow this field to become pure again, that the Kohanim could walk across it. So now you're talking about a person who, on the one hand, was at such a high level that he couldn't relate to people trying to earn a living, to be able to put food on the table. He couldn't relate to that. And the next story we're told about him is how to help people with a little bit of inconvenience. It's a great paradox. But that is the paradox of greatness. That is the paradox of a person at the level of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. And that is really the message of Lag BaOmer, and that's why I say it teaches us also about a Rebbe. Because we have a principle which says, Kol ha'gavoya gavoya b'yoser yored lemata mata yoser. The higher something or someone is, the lower it is able to reach. Meaning to say that its influence can extend far lower than a person who's not as great. So a person who is not so great can't relate to people with their tsuras and with their limitations and with their spiritual challenges. So the person who's not so great gets annoyed at them and says, listen, you've got to fix up your life. And, when you get to a certain level, come and talk to me. But a person who's great, like Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai, so Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai says, look, if I reach a point where I'm so divorced from the people that I can't relate to their tsuras, then I have a problem. I've got to go back into the cave. And I've got to work out how I could relate with all of my greatness to people in all of their loneliness. Otherwise, what's the point of the greatness? The objective of Judaism is not to fly away and have some deep personal spiritual experience. The objective of Judaism is to be able to assist other people and touch other people and inspire other people, that they could actually, that they could rise and they could have a totally different experience. So what Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai really represents for us is that the deepest, most profound elements of Judaism and the greatest saints and tzaddikim of Judaism are absolutely accessible to every single person within the nation. So you come to Lag BaOmer, which is the celebration of such a great tzaddik, somebody who's at such a level that even his colleagues couldn't understand his greatness on the one hand. On the other hand, his greatness is the fact that he could make the whole experience accessible to every single Jewish person. That's why Lag BaOmer is so widely celebrated and so easily celebrated. There are no major expectations. You don't have to stop work. You don't have to avoid electricity. You don't have to sit at home and daven for 6 hours. All you have to do is celebrate, have simcha. But then Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai tells us something much more than that. By the way, Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai says, I have the power to absolve the whole world from whatever damage they might deserve. In other words, Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai's power is not only to invite us into his spiritual experience, but his power is to even help us escape our spiritual problems and even our physical problems. And incidentally, this is just parenthetical. That's why Lag BaOmer is a very powerful day to daven for things that people need. That's why so many people go to Meron, because they know that miracles happen in Meron. They know that today is tonight and tomorrow is a day of big, big miracles for health, for parnosa, for whatever it is that we need. But the interesting thing about the story is, Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai says, as much as I'm willing to be all-inclusive and give everybody a way in and make Yiddishkeit at the highest level accessible to the most simple person, I still have an expectation from you. And that's the story of this fellow who said, Nachem. So I have an expectation from you that you should at least want to be like I am. You should at least want to have that experience. Maybe you're not going to have it, you're right. But at least it's something you should want. You should wish to be at a point that Lag BaOmer is your life. In other words, that you live at a level that the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash doesn't stymie you. It doesn't interfere with your life. You should wish to be at such a spiritual level. And as the Baal Shem Tov always would say, if you would wish to be in a state that you're in the spiritual realm of the Beis HaMikdash, even without the physical Beis HaMikdash being here, then that actually becomes where you live. And if that is where you live, then that is the catalyst for Hashem to restore the Beis HaMikdash to us. So in other words, Lag BaOmer is a day that says, on the one hand, it's absolutely inclusive. Anybody can get onto the bandwagon. Just celebrate and you're already part of the experience, but don't satisfy yourself with that. Make Lag BaOmer a day to say, I wish I had that experience of the Beis HaMikdash. Because when we wish for the Beis HaMikdash, or we wish for the experience of the Beis HaMikdash, that's when Hashem, please God, gives us the Beis HaMikdash. We should be zoiche, we should have the merit that on this Lag BaOmer, we should be able to be with Mashiach in Jerusalem, in the Beis HaMikdash, and have the massive bonfire, not in Meron, but in the Beis HaMikdash itself.
Amen, 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 amen.